Hi guys, this is Fiza Abbas. I'm back with another episode of my interview series. Today I have with me in conversation Simon.
Yep.
Hi Simon.
Hi. Hi, Fizz. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, so let me just tell you a bit about Simon. So Simon is a standing poet laureate. He has released two poetry collections, Death of the Suburb and in the Downtime, which were both published by the Real Press. He has also been working on a new project, Ringside Seat, which is a poetic journey with his father as he entered the final phase of his life. So we'll talk about that later from Simon. So let's just welcome Simon. Hi, Simon. I really hope you are doing well.
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Hi, and thanks for having me.
Okay. So let's just start. So, okay. So my first question to you is how and when did your journey as a writer begin?
Well, this phase probably only started. I probably only started writing the poetry properly again in the last sort of 10 years, which was after my mother died, and then also after a friend of mine committed suicide. I sort of found myself writing again. Actually, after the day after a friend's funeral, I was sat on my own, and I just started. A poem came out, which was the first poem I'd written in a very, very long time. When I was younger, I used to write. I've just cleared my dad's house out and found a film script that me and my friends wrote that we took to the Cannes Film Festival in 1997, I think it was. So I would have been in my 20s then. So I've been writing on and off since a kid, but this period, this last 10 years is when I've probably been doing it more seriously. So yeah, I've been was lucky enough to meet the publishing house, the Real Press, the gentleman who's local, and yeah, get the two books from there really, which is yeah, meant it felt a bit proper because it was in a book.
I'm sorry to hear about your mother and your friend. So I want to ask you about your next collections, as you have spoken that you have published your two collections with the Real Press. So how does this feel now? I mean, getting two collection published, and how does this change your worldview about the way you write, or if it does, or how it makes you feel as a writer. Like, obviously it's a very joyous occasion for you, but as a writer, where do you see it going for you, these two books, the publication of these two books?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. It's really interesting. So the Real Press is David Boyle, who's a local writer for Stenning, where I live. He's done lots and lots of stuff, and he writes for himself. And he set up the independent press locally uh, for for publishing historical stuff originally. And I knew him through the Stenning Bookshop, who've been really supportive of me. And we got chatting a while ago, and he'd heard about my poetry and we talked about it, and then he sort of said he was a historical publisher, and I said, well, I've written the poems in the past, so you could argue that it's all history. So we sort of set up a poetry wing for me mainly. So the first book was kind of probably 4 or 5 years worth of poems that I just sort of threw together with the thought that I didn't really think it was going to go into a book. So the first book was very much a collection of stuff, and I was given a lot of independence for how to do it. And David's a very good editor, but also allowed me to put what I wanted in. So the first book came out, and it didn't. It was an amazing thing to have, and it was brilliant. I was chuffed to have it. But you look at it and you go, God, if I'd actually thought about it, I'd have probably done things very, very differently. So, and then so that was 2016, I should check. I think it was 2018. So it was probably a couple of years in the making. I've got a book here. This is sort of the first one. Is that the right way around, or is that the wrong way around for you on the camera? But anyway, this I think was 2018. So yes, 2018. So it was probably a couple of years in the making, but it didn't feel like it was. It didn't feel like I was thinking about it. So when in 2020, and I had 2 years worth of writing, I sort of got to that point where I thought, well, I was about ready to do the next one, and it was sort of in the mid of the pandemic, and it felt weird to do it anyway. But I messaged David and went, look, I think I'm ready for a next one. And he went, go ahead. So it was really nice with the second book to be much more conscious and think, actually, okay, what I'm going to create is a proper book. So it felt a much more conscious things. So I was very lucky that I knew a couple of artists, so I got them to do some artwork for me, and I felt I curated books a bit more, and I kind of it became a much more, it was a thing of beauty, and we managed to arrange for the two artists to sell their artwork. In fact, they're behind me, the two pictures, the cover and the sort of portrait artist, the sort of author's picture. So the second book became a much more conscious thing. So I'm much prouder of the second book. There's still little elements of it where you think, oh, I'd have done it differently or got the spelling right and stuff like that. But it felt like a much more kind of conscious effort. But again, it came out in the pandemic, which is a bit of a strange thing. So I had an online Zoom book launch and stuff like that. But it felt a much more, it felt more real. And then I was kind of thinking, well, I'm sort of thinking about the next one really. And I kind of thought, well, I was just thinking I'll just knock out a book every 2 years. And, I'm lucky I've got that sort of independence with it. But then my father's came down with COVID in April last year. And he was living in North London. I'm in Sussex. So I couldn't visit him very often previous to that. And he'd been sort of dementing a little bit, but he'd moved down to, we moved him down with COVID to come to a local nursing home. And I'm seeing him more often now, and he got ill recently, and I spent his 84th birthday with him while he was in hospital. And I was sat watching him not being conscious, being very ill, whilst on his 84th birthday being kind of basically thinking he was going to die, which he didn't, fortunately, and survived. And I went home from that and I wrote something. And then what I've been doing is, because I was seeing him every other day while he was in hospital, and I was kind of conscious I was writing something, and I thought, well, actually, maybe the next project shouldn't be just a collection of my stuff. I think maybe here's a project that is something that seemed quite relevant. Most of my personal poems I don't really share very much, certainly not on Facebook. On Twitter they can come out because that's a sort of less personal space, but a few of them I wrote about my dad's dementia, and it came out, and I was struggled to do that because it felt like I was giving too much of my soul away, and I didn't particularly like that. But people would give me the feedback that it resonated with people. And I think as we get older and we watch our parents get ill and our parents moving on, it felt like there's a story there that could be told. And I think I'm probably arrogant enough and overconfident enough to think that maybe I can do that in a way that might be interesting. So it kind of led me to the point of thinking, okay, well, I've got a journey here with my dad, and I don't know how long it will be. And I don't know, well, I know where it's going to end, but I don't know when it's going to end. But it's something that will give me a therapeutic way of writing about my dad. And also I think something that might be a good project. And I don't know, it might turn into a charity thing. I think there may be a way of raising funds for dementia or something like that. I don't know, but it feels like the next project is something that will hopefully resonate with people, and also be something that will become a bit more interesting than just middle-aged white bloke writing poetry. Was that a bit long? Sorry about that.
No. That's completely fine. You can be as casual as you want, and you can talk about anything. It's completely all right. So, as you have spoken about this new project, so my next question is about that. So, what this new project, Ringside Seat, right? That's the name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, would you like to talk about that so that everybody who's watching this can, know about it, or if there's anything that they can, help you with to carry this project with utmost success, so they can also help you with that. So, if you could like to talk about that.
Yeah, well, as I say, the ringside seat was me sat watching my dad, sort of watching his catheter fill up, and kind of that was the image that came out from that moment with my dad. And as I say, it's been ever since then, when they've been out on Twitter, I've been using the hashtag ringside seat. So if people want to look for that, then they'll see, I think most of them have got that hashtag. I might go back and add the hashtag to the older ones. So yeah, it's more about just sort of, it's an ongoing process, I suppose, and it's unfinished, but certainly Twitter seems to be the place where I'm sort of working those poems through. And certainly it's interesting. Twitter, it seems to give validation in some ways and doesn't in other ways. And sometimes you can do something that's completely ignored. But I feel sometimes if you put something that's a bit more kind of heartfelt, then I think it can relatively you can get good feedback about that. And I think that's that's come out of it. So really looking for the hashtag Ringside Seat, and just having a look at that. And if you see it, just give us a comment, really. Because the book will be ready to go as soon as the project's finished, which is a very sad, very polite English way of saying I'm waiting for my dad to die before the book's finished, which is a horrible thing to have to face. But yeah, it's a process, I suppose, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, so as much as I have researched about you or through your Twitter account or on web, so I came to know that you are also a poet laureate. So I found that really impressive. So I want to ask you
Well,
about
I
that.
should say, I should say, it's self-proclaimed in Poet Laureate of Stenning. Uh, I've twice it's been mentioned on in a few places, and I put it up as a joke for people locally to me. I mean, as it is, I have sort of become a bit like that. We had a climate march pre-pandemic, so God, however long that was ago, and they asked me to do it. I did a poem for that. And I sort of just take it upon myself to write about things that are happening in the town, and whether they like it or not, I've become the poet laureate of Stenning. There are many other poets in Stenning who are probably much better, but not all of them are arrogant enough to claim it. So yeah, but it's more about, I think, for me, the job of a poet is to see things from a different perspective and record things from a different perspective, and hopefully that can be reflected back in people. So there are ways of doing that. We have during the pandemic, we've had the whole of the country at the moment is suffering from ash dieback. The ash trees are all dying back. I'm also a tree surgeon, so I have a particular interest in that. And we have a lovely walk in the South Downs in these woods, and there's been all of these trees have been cut down, and the whole area has been felled for safety for people. But some of the children were painting stones, and they put in an old tree, they put a load of painted stones, and it was like an altar to this dying wood. So I wrote a poem for that, called The Treasure Tree, and I put that up there. So that little things like that where you think I needed to thank the kids who done that and record that during a pandemic we're surrounded, these trees are surrounded by dead things and dying things, but yet there's hope of life. And kind of I think that's sort of something that we can see and sort of help people see as well.
Okay, so I want to ask you another question, and that is, as a writer, how do you feel how important it is for a writer to talk about issues that affect the world on a larger scale? Like I know that people talk about it, and there are very a lot of work written on literature on a lot of topics that impact the world. So, how important is it for you as a writer to talk about things that matter on a global scale?
Yeah, really important. I think there's I suppose, yeah, I suppose for me, I can write about myself, but I think also I'm quite a political person. I'm very much on the sort of left politically, which is brilliant for me because we have a very hard right love government, and there's lots of things that I can criticize. But yeah, certainly I think kind of the environment's really, really important, and kind of I think, yeah, as a writer, with the way that we can find out what's wrong with the world and tell people about it in a kind of pithy and concise way that I think resonates with people. And I think kind of, yeah, I think if you can hone down the problem and put it in a way that makes sense to people, then I can't do much else, but I can do that. So yeah, I think politics is always really important for me. I think I can do the self-reflective poems, but and they're quite nice, and they're the stuff that goes in books. But if I want to put stuff out there, and certainly if I'm going to use Facebook or Twitter to put stuff out, then the political stuff is something that I think resonates with people. I think sometimes we're talking to a bubble of everyone believing the same thing, but if it goes through to someone and it kind of resonates in some way, so yeah, I am quite shouty, lefty, political, unfortunately, for everyone else listening to me.
Okay, interesting. So, okay. So, in the broad spectrum of your collection of works, how much do you think your work is motivated by processing of grief? And adding on to that, do you think grief is a key motivator for poetic expression? And I'm asking this for myself as well, because sometimes I also, use poetry to process my grief. So, would really appreciate if you could answer this.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. The first book, Death of the Suburb, is about the house where I grew up. And that was about how the house, it was, the first book is very much about kind of me processing the sort of my mum's death, and how my father coped with my mum's death. So, in the 10 years that she'd passed, my dad didn't cope very well and sort of stayed in the museum of my mother in this house. And kind of for me, it was about the family home had become a very different thing, and it wasn't a family home anymore. It was a grief palace for my mother, which kind of tainted a lot of it, and changed it. So yeah, I think, yeah. And the time when I restarted writing was after the funeral of a very dear friend who sort of committed suicide, and that was the moment of kind of clarity for me about writing, and then it kind of spiraled from there. So yeah, absolutely. And the first book feels very much like a book about my mum and the sort of processing that, and then also becoming a parent. And there's an element of kind of the problem with a parent dying is you become a child, and I'm a middle-aged man who's got children of my own, so it's a strange relationship I have with being a parent but also being a child. And then the second book feels like it's me processing my father, I suppose, and my father's grief and my father's management of my mum, the situation with my mum and how he manages his own life. So yeah, it's very much looking back at the two. It feels like, yeah, one's about mum, and the first one is dedicated to mum, even though she passed away. But the second one, I kind of reluctantly dedicated to my dad, because one, he won't know and he doesn't really care. But it felt like I did it because I felt I had to. But then reading it back when I was sort of doing it out there and sort of touring it around on Zoom and things like that, you look at it and go, yeah, actually it's about sort of, yeah, my dad. And my dad isn't dead, but he's dementing, and he's not my dad anymore, effectively, and I've become in some ways sort of his parent, because I'm managing him and looking after him. And there's the grief of that. And yeah, I think it's yeah, really important. And writing for me is therapy. I think it's a way that I process things and manage things. It's much less painful than punching a wall.
I just want to say more power to you. Like, I have also lost my mother, so I can completely understand the grief that you are going through. So,
Yeah,
God bless you, and may you get
yeah,
more
and
strength
yeah,
to cope with this.
yeah. It's really, yeah, it's a very hard thing to say, isn't it? I don't know. It's kind of, yeah, it's really difficult to say. But yeah, it's a very strange thing as an adult to go through grief, I suppose, isn't it? And I mean, it was weird going from my mum's 10-year anniversary, and that felt like a really big thing. And literally a week, 2 weeks before that, my dad was in hospital. I thought, well, I genuinely went through a period thinking, well, he's just going to die on her death day. And I just kind of thought that would be really significant if they both go on the same day. But the old bugger sticking around for a bit longer, which is good.
I can completely understand that. I have really no words. I just want to ask you if you could, read any poem that you have written about your experiences with your father, or anything that you would like to share. I would love to hear that.
Oh, well, shall I do Ringside Seat, which is the
Yeah,
original one?
sure. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it down here because it's on a phone at the moment. So let me. I've got to find it. Um, Here we go. God, I haven't read this one for a while. So this one was the one I wrote 19th of June, I think I wrote it. So that was after Dad had just been in hospital. Okay, it's called Ringside Seat. I've been watching a jigsaw of my father, slowly being dismantled, a piece at a time, a bi-weekly grief in preparation for the big day. Each time the phone goes, or the next catastrophe comes, I'm a little bit more and a little bit less prepared. This man I never really looked up to. The idealization stopped many years before. This conflict of interest mutating into a pre-corpse, and I get a ringside seat. I keep a cheery face and make cocksure jokes, mock in a loving way. We laugh at the situation and answer the same fucking questions again and again. My mother, spinning in her grave, waiting for him to join her. He wanted to be there as soon as she went, but he didn't have the heart, so he lived with her ghost, haunting the rest of us. And now, as he approaches, I'm burdened again, observing and engulfed, conflicted up to my ears. I fill my glass with grief, sup it down to numb it, for the respite of hazing until it bubbles again. Not a very cheerful one, I'm afraid. Thank you. Do you want me to do the latest one with the house clearance?
Yeah, please go
Which was
ahead.
the one about. Thank you, and then I'll stop. So this one I wrote on. Well, it was Sunday. On Sunday passing, I had to clear out the family house. So that was sort of 40 years worth of family life that my dad was now left it permanently, and it's being sold. So my brother and I went and cleared it in September, and I had to go and do the final clearance basically on my own. Okay, it's not titled at the moment. For £2,000, 2 lives were cleared. 40 years in one house as it fell apart and grew out of control. For a last visit, I cleared what I wanted, picking up the toot that just couldn't be landfilled, and I sat and ate a salt beef sandwich and a latke with pickles. Alone, surrounded by the dead people from the photos in the car. Nana Betty, Papa Ben, Grandma Ray, Grandpa Alec, Mum, Dad, not dead, but no longer there. Never to return, the last ties slowly being cut as the years pass, the last vestiges of my past life. I didn't look back. No one waved me off as I left. No one asked me to ring when I got home. No tears in their eyes for the children growing on. The car, weighed down with memory, veering to the left with badly loaded bias, smelling of the house, no longer a home. To be put in a loft, stored until we know what to do with it all. One small car filled with a marriage, a family, a death, a life moved inexorably on. Thank you. Thanks.
Uh, I really love the poem, and I just say that, may God grant you more strength, and you get to cope with this. And all my prayers are for you and your father. Uh,
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you a question about poetic inspiration. Like, I have had a lot of interviews that say that the process of writing feels more like being a conduit for inspiration rather than the source of creation itself. So, what's your take on this statement? Do you think we create poetry or we act just as a conduit to process inspiration?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't. Yeah, I. I suppose for me, inspiration, I kind of look for the inspiration, and then the poetry comes from that. Sometimes it will be an image. An image, or I'll see an image and that will kind of make me want to write about that and see where it goes. Sometimes there's a turn of phrase or a situation that I kind of that needs to come out. And for me, poetry, I don't have particularly good form or function with poetry. I don't like rhyming. I don't really kind of stick to a thing. I'm kind of a bit repetitive, and that's about it. So for me, it's very much it's just a non-conventional way of writing things, and that works really well for me. So yeah, for me it'll be I'll have an image, or I'll sit and I'll be somewhere and I'll think about things for the week, and then Saturday morning or Sunday morning I'll sit and write something down. So for me it's the I'll find the inspiration, I'll find the thing to write about, and then it'll come. So for me it's more it's external, and it's my way of processing it, really.
Okay, interesting. So I want to ask you about what are your future plans with regards to writing?
Yeah, well, hopefully, Ringside Seat will be whatever it will be. Um, and then we'll see. I've taken up the sort of poetry editor role for the Real Press as well. So I'm working on a few projects. We've got two other projects that are on their way. I'm really trying hard for the projects to be a bit more diverse. So it's more kind of looking for what the projects are. So I've got a fellow poet called Ali Rocket, who I do performances with on a regular basis. We're at the sort of final edits on that. And there's a guy called John Magidson who's got another book coming out. So yeah, it's kind of working on other people's, and then hopefully once Ringside Seat's done, I'll have some other poems, and yeah, just whilst I can, and it's very easy, I don't have to submit and ask to get for people to publish me. Having access to the publishing house, I can just keep going while the publishing house exists. So but yeah, that's very lucky. I don't have to do the submissions, and I don't do competitions because I don't like losing. So I'm not very good at sort of that. So I'm quite lucky that I've just got this one place where I can just do it. No one can hear it. It doesn't really matter, but I'm happy that I've got the books.
Okay, so that's about it from my side. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask.
Gosh, blimey. I had so many I wanted to ask about you and your writing, but I mean, I'll have to do some sort of proper research and dig in. No, I mean, it's very kind of you to sort of spend the time and interview me. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, and hopefully we'll have more contacts on. I can catch up more of your stuff on Twitter, and we can connect again. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I think I'll just ask my husband to turn off the recording so we can have a little chit chat post interview. Okay, so recording has
Brilliant.
stopped.